триває
It is 100th day of Ukraine's resistance. This is Ukraine Media Center, and we have right now with us Ms. Kateryna Pavlichenko, the Deputy Minister of the Internal, and we will be speaking of a difficult subject, the sexual crimes of the Russian occupiers. Hello. Can you please share how these crimes are documented and who is doing this and how? Thank you. That's indeed a very challenging subject, a very latent one. These are the crimes, sexual crimes against civilians, and right now is 100 days since a full-scale invasion of the Russian troops. It is 100 days since we are sharing how Russia is violating all the law of law, how it is bombing schools, kindergartens, theaters, hospitals, and also the enemy is using sexual violence as direct crimes against civilians. For the Russian occupiers, the rape has been the rule of the game. They have been doing this, and we were learning this from our international partners, experts who say that the world has seen on many occasions how this tactics was used in Chechnya and Syria. And right now, all the police units, the law enforcement bodies are working to document all of the terrible facts, the crimes that the Russian occupiers have been committing over the 100 days of this current war. Speaking of the sexual violence against civilians, this is indeed a difficult subject, and the victims quite often don't want to speak of this. This pain is something they want to forget as fast as possible. But also there is an additional complexity in this case because the evidence is quite often insufficient or lacking altogether, because the Russian occupiers were hiding the tracks of those crimes. They were burning the bodies of the people they tortured, and this entails complexities in documenting. At the same time, sexual violence is no more considered as an inseparable consequence of war. There is the understanding that this is a preventable crime, and this is a crime for which people need to be held responsible according to the requirements of international law. We are working with non-governmental international organizations which are also assisting in documenting the crimes and collecting the evidence. It is also worth pointing out that these crimes of rape, they will be prosecuted no matter when the information becomes available, and the measures will be taken to collect the evidence. We understand that time is working against us here, so the faster we are collecting the evidence, the faster we are documenting the crimes, the higher the probability to hold people responsible for the crimes they have committed. Speaking of the statistics, I'd like to mention that there are dozens of cases of criminal investigation against the Russian military here. The police only had 500 cases where people reported on sexual crimes in Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kyiv, Luhansk, Kharkiv, Kherson, and Chernihiv regions. So these are the regions that saw active combat operations, and there are 16 such cases that were already filed by the investigators of the National Police. The information about other facts is still being checked and the evidence is being collected. We already have uh, the confirmations from the units of National Police about the rapes of underage girls. We also have confirmations of the facts of rapes of the elderly. So right now the investigation is going on in those cases. Also, we already know that 3 people already were uh, uh, were issued the letter of suspicion. And also, speaking of the specialized mobile police group that is working here in Kyiv region since the 18th of April, and there are also groups in Sumy, in Kharkiv. These are separate mobile police groups, and they are specialized because their work is intended to find out and document sexual crimes against civilians. These groups contain these groups have people with experience in domestic violence investigation, in juvenile cases. Also, there are psychologists and investigators. They are working daily on the territories that suffered the most from the combat operations and the regions that were occupied. Here in Kyiv region, the police group has discovered 13 victims of sexual crimes, and in many communities of Kyiv region, the evidence was collected. Also, we understand that these crimes are the latent ones. These are the crimes people generally don't want to share about. So we have difficulties working with the victims, but at the same time, those who are victims or those who are aware of the things that happened, they are also guided to use psychological help. We are working closely with the Ministry of Social Policy and the Ministry of Health to make sure that these people we discover have the opportunity to get this kind of assistance. And that's it. So we are ready to take questions. This is Ukraine Forum. I'm Vitaly Holod. Can you please share how the police interacts with other law enforcement bodies in the investigation of sexual crimes? And also, speaking of women and children who are victims, are there any trends, are there any regions that suffered most? Let's start from your last question. We understand that the territories that suffered most from the Russian occupation, the territories which saw the most active combat operations, the territory where the Russian occupiers were committing their atrocities. These are also the territories which have the highest numbers of such crimes, and this is where the mobile police groups are working right now. But most probably it's very difficult to cover all those territories and to learn about the full scale of the crimes that were happening, because not all the people are ready to actually speak of what has happened to them. Now, speaking of the interaction with others, right now the Ukrainian nation, our society, and the international community as well are joining their efforts to document the atrocities committed here in Ukraine. So we do have cooperation with the civil sector, with the human rights organizations, which are also contributing to the documenting of those crimes, and they are also providing the evidence to the prosecutor's office, to the police, to the State Security Service of Ukraine. Some of those crimes which are qualified as the crimes under the Article 438 of the Penal Code of Ukraine, they are to be investigated by the Security Service of Ukraine. So the crimes of sexual violence against civilians, this is also something that is investigated by the State Security Service. I have a follow-up question. How can we ensure that these criminals are held responsible, including the international courts and international institutions? And could you please explain the pathway of a criminal case for our international journalists? Yes, so the first thing that needs to happen is for the crime to be discovered and documented. And in this regard, the national police is working two ways. The first is direct collection of evidence in the territories where the combat operations were happening, and this is where the mobile police groups are working. And the second area is the information that becomes available thanks to our collaboration with human rights organizations, with the information available in the media. We are tracking this, we are documenting this, and the investigations are happening to find out more about the facts about the crimes committed. Wherever we have sufficient evidence, we include the case to the United Registry of investigations, and this starts the investigation according to the usual procedure, where the evidence is collected. There are psychological evidence collected, other types of evidence, and the evidence generated will be later provided to the Ukrainian and international courts, international tribunals. So we are currently mostly at the stage of collecting the evidence. We are finding out about the victims and the criminals and also the witnesses.
Please. Дуже дякую. Thank you so much. Valerie Hopkins, New York Times. I have two questions. The first one is, what can you say about the proportion of victims, survivors? How many have survived, and how many situations are you finding that the victim was actually killed? And the second question is, and I don't know if this is exactly your jurisdiction, but what can you say, if the case comes to trial, will the survivor need to testify in court? what are you doing now to make it easier for survivors to see justice? Thank you.
I will start with the question about the testimonies. We are right now seeing that it's very important not to re-traumatize the victims, the survivors of the violence situations. And it's very important, first and foremost, for the person to get the rehabilitation necessary, and so that we do not make this person retell the situation time and again. I understand, and we understand this situation and work to prevent re-traumatization of the people when collecting the evidence that the person can provide. We are using the approach that would be brief enough not to traumatize a person, but sufficient for the evidence to be sufficient for the court. Speaking of the percentage of the victims who have survived, it's difficult to give any exact number right now. This information is being collected, and we also understand that many territories are not deoccupied yet. So this information is being collected about the people who are victims, and whenever we find bodies of civilians, the reasons of death are being investigated, including the possibility of sexual violence committed on those. So the evidence is being collected. So then a follow-up question from me. What would be the advice for the media? How these subjects should be covered in the media so that we avoid re-traumatization and other associated challenges? Here, using this opportunity of speaking here with you, speaking with the journalists, I would like to point out that indeed it is very important to follow the rules of the journalism ethics, because each time we are retelling the story of a victim, we need to be careful to this experience, and actually the information you are sharing, it can influence somehow the decisions of other victims who are still silent, who are still afraid to make their story public. So I would kindly request you as professionals to be as careful as possible in your communication with the victims and in your coverage of the events that these people have survived. Hello, I'm Dmitro Dedura, Espresso TV channel. You have mentioned that there are already criminal cases that are being investigated. So can you please share what will be the responsibility of the people guilty of those crimes? Are these only Russians who are the suspects, or are there Ukrainians as well, because we are a diverse country? And also, speaking of the occupied territories, do we get any information from there about the sexual crimes? In the 16 cases, 16 criminal cases I spoke about, the ones that were recorded to the Unified Registry, these are the crimes committed by the Russian occupiers. So these are the sexual crimes I'm speaking about. And Right now, the evidence is being collected. We are getting information even from the territories that are occupied right now.
Thank you. Right now, with the overview that you have, with the overview that you now have of all the cases, what conclusions can we draw about the perpetration of these crimes? Is this something that is rape something that was being weaponized, being ordered, that you've seen, commanders encouraging their soldiers to do, or do you see that this is more, individual, irresponsible? I don't have the words for their acts, but that this is not something that the ranks of the military are encouraging, but something that these soldiers take their own initiative to do. Thank you.
I like to share that sexual violence is indeed a weapon against civilians, and right now we are collecting the information about the people who committed these crimes and those commanders who did not prevent these actions from happening. If there are no further questions, we proceed with. Okay, one more question here.
Our nation today. My name is Yusuke Takano from Japanese newspaper Asahi. I actually have two questions. That the first one is, in the long term, what kind of problem will occur to those the victims of the sexual the violence, and then how the government will deal with that the thing next few years or maybe 10 years. And the second question is that you mentioned, I think, the 500 the sexual crimes recorded, and is it all the, how can I say, the rape, the crime? I just want to make sure this point. Thank you.
Good questions. Thank you. We indeed need to understand that these were 500 people who reported the crimes, but not in every case this was rape. In some cases this was just other kinds of sexual crimes that did not involve sex per se, but this is some sexual harassment and similar things. So in total there were 500 of such cases reports, and this also includes the information from the media and other open sources. Speaking of the programs for the future, I would like to point out that between the government of Ukraine and also UN organizations, there is a memorandum of understanding according to which the special centers are going to be established with different types of support, including rehabilitation and psychological help for the survivors of these crimes. And here we indeed have the support and commitment from our international partners who already have experience with aiding such kinds of civilians. So as a part of bilateral cooperation, we will be exchanging experience. We will be inviting as many people as possible from the psychological and other services to be involved for these people to be rehabilitated. So one more brief question. So 500 you mean, or 50? Oh, actually it was 50, not 500. So yeah. So unfortunately, I'm out of time. I have to go to the Cabinet of Ministers.
Aude from German press agency. How many suspects are there? Maybe I've missed this. Suspects, how many people have you in custody that are involved in such crimes?
Right now, we have 3 persons who were informed of suspicions. So these are the citizens of the Russian Federation that were here in Ukraine that were committing these crimes. And the crimes were committed in Kyiv region and also in Chernihiv region as well. Thank you. So we have to finish here. You can also ask your questions directly from assistants here, but Kateryna has to leave. And our next briefing will be at 2 p.m. We will have Alexander